Hi, and welcome to the National New Teacher Support Podcast, sponsored by New Teacher University, and I'm your host, Dr. Terry Ross. Today, we have an award-winning guest with us, Dr. Bobbie Mills, and she's going to talk with us today about classroom routines and procedures and how to establish culture and climate in your classroom. Dr. Bobbie Mills, please introduce yourself and tell us who you are and how did we arrive at this point.
Well, hello, everybody. I am Dr. Bobbie Mills. I am founder and CEO of Elevated Vision Educational Consulting, where we help leaders transform from the traditional status quo to elevated visions of leadership through education, elevation, and vision. I came about this position because I work with teachers on a daily basis and I see the need for the support. And I also see the need to help teachers to elevate to their highest heights, whether they are school leaders or teachers or any other type of CEO in any other company. So thank you, Dr. Ross, for having me here. And I'm excited to be on this podcast with you today.
And thank you so much for joining us today with Elevated Vision. And I like that you said you're working with teachers because teachers are the CEO of that classroom. They are leaders, and we really want to make sure that our teachers begin to see themselves not as I'm just a teacher, because that's what you'll hear sometimes, but I'm a classroom leader and I'm a
Right,
leader in this school and in this space. So
right.
thank you for elevating teachers to that level. And thank you for what you do for teachers and on behalf of the children of this country every day. So
Okay.
today we're going to talk about classroom routines and procedures. And why are classroom routines and procedures important?
Well, they are important because they set the tone. When children first come into a school, they're smart and crafty and they're trying to figure out, okay, what teacher can I get over on? What teacher can I not get over on? So it's important for teachers to have those routines and procedures in place. And when I say routines and procedures, we're talking about making sure that the teacher is working with the students with the rules and procedures. Because when you just develop rules and procedures on your own and don't allow the students to have a voice or a choice in it, then that's where sometimes your problems are going to come into play in your classrooms. So when you have your kids come to you very beginning of the year and you sit down with them and you have them to talk and have a voice in what the classroom rules and procedures should be, that does one of two things. It has the buy-in, and the students will also have a sense of community because they're going to take ownership of those rules and procedures.
So thank you so much. And it is important that they have some buy-in. So how do you give students a voice in the classroom routines and procedures? What does that look like for a new teacher?
Well, for a new teacher, it's simply having a conversation and building a relationship with them. Just sitting down with the students and say, okay, guys, here are some of my non-negotiables, what has to happen. You have to walk in quietly, voice level 0. But what are some things that you would like to see as part of the routines? Where would you like to place your book bags? And I'm just using that as an example. Just having students to have a voice and allowing them to feel some sense of accountability and ownership.
Thank you for that. And I like that you only gave out two things as your non-negotiable. Walk in quietly. And what was the second one?
The second one was just simply, okay, where are we placing our book bags?
Where are we placing our book bags?
Yeah.
Well, really, you only gave one then, walk in quietly, because it's important for them to know that when we're establishing, when we're first getting class started, I need everyone's attention. I need everyone to come in and know what we're going to do. So first, we're going to walk in quietly. Now what? And you said now they can establish where we want to put our book bags. And you're giving them the why behind why they need to walk in quietly. So what are some other routines and procedures that we want to put in place for students when we're establishing our norms for the classroom?
Well, when you're establishing your norms for the classroom, it's important that you actually practice those routines. Our children, they need that repetition. So, for example, lining up for lunch or lining up for recess or lining up going to the restroom. How do we line up? Are we lining up on a voice level 0 or are we lining up on a voice level 3 where they are allowed to talk just a little bit? So, you have to continuously practice with students, just practicing walking throughout the building. You know, the first day or the first week of schools, I have walked into some and I just saw teachers practicing, walking to the media center or walking to the cafeteria and walking back to the classroom.
Mhm.
And then you also have to make sure you are correcting behaviors right then and there on the spot. Because
Mhm.
if you don't correct those behaviors, students will think that, okay, I just got over on the teacher, so she let that slide. So let me see what else I'm going to be able to get by on with the teacher. So you have to make sure that you are correcting those behaviors. Also, make sure that you reset at the beginning of each class, each quarter, or also at the 6 week mark, because you have to make sure that students understand the routines, they understand what the procedures are, because again, they have to keep hearing it over and over again.
So thank you for that. So let's just go back to the beginning. What strategies can be used to establish routines and procedures?
Well, just what I said earlier, just making sure that you allow those students to have that voice and choice. You have to make sure that, you're practicing those routines.
Mhm.
You have to continuously practice over and over. You cannot expect to say it just one time. Okay, guys, this is how we line up. And then the next day you don't say it and then they line
Yes.
up noisily. And then, the next day you don't say it again and then it gets worse because then you're ready to write a referral or you're screaming at the top of your lungs. So you have to make sure that you are continuously practicing those routines. You're going to get sick of hearing it, and the kids are going to be sick of hearing it, but they need to hear that over and over again. And also, what I said, just making sure that you correct the behaviors, because students, again, they are smart and they're going to see what you are going to allow them to get away with and what you're not going to allow them to get away with. So make sure you are constantly reminding them of those rules and procedures when they are broken. And then the last thing I would say is what I said earlier is having that reset at the beginning of each quarter, each 6 weeks, or even after the holidays. You have to make sure that you are doing that because, again, that repetition is key for our children.
Thank you for sharing that piece about reset, because every time something new happens in the class, it interferes or interrupts the culture and climate. So
Yes, it
you get a new student, or there's an assembly and the class is cut in half,
does.
or it's after Labor Day now, or it's after fall break now. Now it's after
Right.
Thanksgiving. So each time you have to reset and go back through the routines and procedures, not because the students are being disobedient, but because that's human nature.
Right.
Anytime there's interruption, we have to reset. So thank you so much for sharing that. So how can I get my students settled before they even enter the classroom? What can I do to make that happen?
Well, one of the things that you definitely need to do, you need to make sure that you have your temperature checks. And what I mean by temperature checks, you got to make sure that you greet your students at the door, look them in the face, so that you can gauge their social and emotional well-being. The reason that this is important is because some students, they may have experienced trauma before
Mhm.
entering your classroom. And also prior to coming to the classroom, they may have not have had such a positive interaction with their previous teacher, and so you want to make sure you get a good gauge on your students, because if they have negative energy outside of your classroom, they are going to bring that negative energy inside of your classroom, which can transfer to other students in the classroom, and then we got a whole mess on our hands. So it's important to make sure that we gauge those temperature checks and make
Mhm.
sure we know where our students are on a social and emotional level. Another thing, you just want to make sure before they enter the classroom, you are reiterating those classroom procedures. You're letting them know, okay, guys, remember when we come into the classroom, we enter on a voice level 0. And again, that goes back to what I talked about earlier. You have to make sure that students are hearing this consistently. You're going to
Yes.
sound like a broken record, but they need that consistency. And, the final reason, you have to build relationships. And a lot of people sometimes they don't know, what that means when we say build relationships. Well, you have to learn what your students' interests are. And what I like to call it is that small talk as they enter the classroom.
Mhm.
Just giving you an example. Did you watch the basketball game last night? Or one thing that I love to do when I go into schools is
Mhm.
compliment young ladies' hair. Oh my goodness, your braids are so pretty, or your
Yes.
outfit is so pretty.
Yes.
Building that relationship. And teachers also need to make sure, in order to help build and bridge these relationships, that they provide their students with student interest inventories, find out what their likes are. And, don't just take those inventories and use those as filler times, actually look at it so that you can make that connection with students to build those relationships. And, by you doing that, students see that, you are human and you are making those human connections with them.
Well, Dr. Mills, you really, that was high level. You hit it. You said greet them at the door, and you're checking for trauma. You mentioned social emotional learning, consistency, relationships, and interest inventories, and all of these are excellent ways for teachers to get to know their students and to establish routines and procedures. But it also takes patience for this piece.
Yes, this is not something that's going to, happen overnight. You just have to, just keep at it, just
Mhm.
keep at it. And eventually the kids, they're going to come around. And, when I go back to the building relationship piece, because that is so important. Again, we
Yes,
always say build relationships, build relationships. There are different ways to build relationships,
absolutely.
just actually, maybe spending time with them during lunch, or, talking to them during a class change, or if you see them in the hallway, just having that little small talk, because that goes a long way with the child. Because if you do that, the child says to his or herself, oh my goodness, they see me. And
Hmm.
children want to be seen, in a positive light.
Absolutely. And new teachers have this tendency, and seasoned teachers, that when the school year starts, they have a pacing guide, they have curriculums, and they're just ready to jump in and get started. And
Exactly.
this is called going slow so that you can go fast. There are several researchers out there that's done the work. At the elementary level, they say 6 plus 36, take the first 6 weeks of school to establish routines and procedures. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not teaching or that you're not covering the curriculum. It just
Mhm.
means that you're making sure that as you do that, you're making sure that you keep routines and procedures and culture and climate at the top of consciousness. What would you say to new teachers or even seasoned teachers at this point that they feel like they are in a space where they have to just jump in and get started? What do you do to take that step back and slow down and see the humanity of our students and make sure that we're practicing the routines and procedures and not just jumping into the curriculum? What strategy would you give them to do that?
Well, I like to use this analogy about purchasing a new car. When you purchase a new car, you don't just jump into that new car and just drive off. You have to adjust the mirrors, you have to adjust your seat, adjust the radio. So it's the same thing in a classroom. When you first jump in, you're going to constantly be making those adjustments all throughout the school year. May be making adjustments the entire school year, adjusting seating, adjusting where you're going to position yourself, adjusting where you're going to place, particular students, because this student doesn't get along with this student. So, just constantly making those adjustments throughout the year. Just take your time, because it's not going to happen all at once. You're going to always be making adjustments. I'll still make adjustments right now in my car, and I've had my car, forever. So I'm
Yes.
still adjusting that mirror, adjusting that radio. So it's the same thing in the classroom. You have to look at it the same way.
Yes. And I like that analogy because I was thinking that every time we take our car to the shop, when the mechanic get in and do things, when we get back in, we have to readjust because they may have driven it or they may have had to move it and they had to adjust the seats. So it's just like when the administration come in for an evaluation or an observation and they give you feedback, you just adjust. Don't take it
Exactly.
personal. Just know that that's the mechanic helping you to get better. So thank you so much for those analogies, Dr. Mills. What do students need to know about your classroom before they even enter your classroom? So what would they need to know about the routines and procedures?
Well, one of the things that they definitely need to know is how, again, how to enter the classroom. Teachers need to make sure before they even cross that classroom threshold that they know, okay, guys, we enter at a voice level 0, or when you enter, this is where you go to turn in your homework. This is where you go to get your paper and pencils if, they don't have those items before entering the classroom. When and where technology is permitted, and what they should do if they don't have their technology for the day, such as their Chromebook or a laptop. They also need to know something as simple as, where do they sit, where are they supposed to sit, where do they place their book bags, and where do they turn in their homework. So there are little things like that that can make a huge difference in determining how the first few minutes of your classroom goes. It is a lot, but it can be compacted in those 5 minutes.
Absolutely. And it's about having a place for everything and everything in its place. And then it's also labeled. And I really like that you elevated, if they don't have paper and pencil, where do they go to get that? Because I know teachers that will take up 10 minutes because several students don't have pencils and paper, and saying, well, I'm going to write you up, to come in my room. Well, why not, when we're in class, students leave pencils all the time. Just put them in the pencil area. We have monies to purchase
Yeah,
materials and supplies.
yeah,
Sometimes let's just purchase pencils and paper, and that way that's an area that we don't even have to worry with. And especially schools that are Title I schools, the administration, I know that as a principal, I found that there was a recurring of just students being written up for pencils and paper. So the one particular day at faculty meeting, I intentionally took 5,000 pencils in cases of paper, and I had them lined up on a table behind me. And as we went through faculty meeting at the end, I told teachers, I said, please come and get as many pencils as you'd like and as much paper as you'd like, because we don't want to write students up for that. We're a Title I school. Come and get. They said, well, it's about teaching them responsibility. And I hated to go there, but I asked them, I said, now there are times that I'm going over your evaluation with you, and you'll ask me, can you pass me a Post-it note and a pencil? Because
mhm.
you came to the meeting for your evaluation empty-handed. And I
We
passed you,
all need a little grace.
yes, and I passed you pencil and Post-it notes. I even may have given you a legal pad and told you can have it, because I'm not in there to talk about whether you bought pencil and paper. We're talking about improvements. So let's
Mhm.
have the same grace with our students. So thank you so much
Exactly.
for that.
And we have to take the excuses away from our children, because sometimes children, they deliberately come into the classroom without their materials. So
Yes.
we have to take those excuses away from our children.
And they only go into the classrooms without their materials to the teachers that they know is going to be a big issue.
Exactly.
Now, the teachers who they say, you have pencil and paper over here, come on, let's get started, they're
They
not
will
going to do
find it.
that. Yes, they're going to go straight in for that. So, as you stated, our students are very smart, they're very crafty, and it's not that they're trying to necessarily get over on anybody, it's the nature of the age.
Right.
It's their humanness in testing limits, and you'll see that in every species on Earth, that
True.
the younger ones are going to do things, and it's the adult's job to train them, or to at
Exactly.
least guide them in the right
Mhm.
direction. So that's part of our job, to help make sure that they have it. So what should we've talked about what it looks like for them to come into the classroom, what are the expectations, and how do we get them to those expectations. Now, what should the first 5 minutes of class look like? Because if you can establish the first 5 minutes of your class, the next 20 to 30 minutes will roll very, very smoothly. I'm not going to
Mhm.
say the whole class will, because then you have to establish the routines for during teaching, and then what are your routines for ending the class. And Dr. Mills, thank you so much for agreeing that we will go through a series on that. But right now, what should the first 5 minutes of class look like?
Well, the first 5 minutes of class should look like this. Every instructional minute should be maximized. Teachers have to make sure that they over plan. You cannot give children not a single second of downtime, because the moment that you do, that's when you will see little behavior start to rear its ugly head. So you
Yes.
have to make sure that every instructional minute is maximized, meaning when children walk in the door, immediately they should know what their procedures are. They should immediately know, okay, I either need to get my Chromebook or I don't need my Chromebook today to begin my warm up. And if you do have a warm up on the board, they need to know where to find that warm up assignment. And during the first 5 minutes, this is not the time for the teacher to be sitting at his or her desk doing, just checking attendance or
Yes.
doing other little things. Teachers need to be up facilitating around the room, taking again those temperature checks and gauging where their students are academically. It's also a time for teachers to conference with students during the first 5 minutes as they are walking around. Because if children see that the teacher is not engaged, then they are not going to be engaged. So
Absolutely.
engagement goes both ways. And again, just taking those temperature checks during the first 5 minutes. So really everybody in that classroom
Mhm.
should be engaged. It's not just the students. The teacher has to be engaged back with the students.
Absolutely. And knowing that when I come in, there's something there every day for me, like a do now. First
Yes.
of all, I know what to walk in and get done just to have a seat, but there's a do now for me to do while the teacher is engaging in terms of calling roll, checking the temperature, making sure that everyone, have the things that they need for the rest of the class. So thank you for sharing that. And when teachers are, and you talked about them moving during the beginning of class, if you're up moving and taking roll, or you know how to circulate the classroom, people call them laps now.
Yes.
In some places, if you're taking laps even before class start, students will get used to knowing that, oh no, I can't have my phone down low
Because they will
doing
do it.
something. Yes. Or they'll know that, oh, well, I better remain engaged because they're going to pass by my desk. So if you're stationary at the front of the classroom, that is very, very, very difficult to do. So thank you for sharing that with us. Do you have anything else that you'd like to share around classroom routines and procedures that teachers can do just to get their class started?
Just to get their class started, I would again go back to saying that, classroom management, it starts before they even get into the classroom. So you have to, again, make sure that you are taking those temperature checks on your students. Make sure that you are looking at your students eye to eye, checking on their social and emotional well being, and just making sure that you are constantly building those relationships each and every day. If you do that, then when they enter the classroom, it shouldn't be as bad.
And thank you for sharing the piece. You've mentioned eye contact several times, and I think we underestimate the importance of looking in students' eyes. I read something years ago that said the eyes are the windows to the soul.
Yes.
And I felt that way for many, many years, because sometimes there are certain people that I don't want to give much eye contact to because I don't want to engage that energy in some instances.
Right. Right.
However, as a principal, I learned through the responsive classroom approach that when I'm standing in the front of the building and greeting every student, I'm not just standing there greeting, I'm making eye contact with every child that walks through that door if I'm not distracted. And what I
Mhm.
found by doing that, I could see the trauma. I could see the fear. I could see the hurt or the shame. And just saying something to those students to bring them out of that. Like,
Right.
oh, I like those gym shoes. Oh, look at you today. Come on in, hold your head up, smile. Little things like that would just break the mold. Or if I saw trauma, I would say, come here for a minute. And if
Mhm.
they didn't want to step to me, I would say, well, could you stand to the side over there just for 1 second until I could get them
Exactly.
to the counselor or someone, because I don't want you to bring that trauma in the building, because what is it going to do to the classroom environment or the school environment? Because trauma
Mhm.
is real. And I think so often that we have normalized trauma
Yes.
for our students.
Yes.
I can remember being a kid and I had never seen a dead body before, except in a casket, and it was an older person. Well, in my first principal job, I'm looking on TV news one evening and someone has gotten killed in an apartment complex, and in the background are my students in the camera, moving around, some of them waving at the camera and things like that. And I got on the phone instantly and called for the trauma team to come to be in the building the next morning. Sure enough, after the lights had gone out that night and everybody gone to bed, those students came in the next morning with just a glaze over their eyes.
Wow.
You know, and we needed that. And it's so important that we take time and look for the trauma, but also invest time into social emotional learning and helping our children regulate.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. There are some things that you elevated that I want to just recap. You talked about, again, greeting the students at the door, social emotional learning, helping them to work through trauma. And you talked about the importance of consistency around your routines and procedures, and even practicing your routines and procedures. And the big one you mentioned, relationships and interest inventories, getting to know your students and knowing that management begins before your students even enter the classroom, through your planning, through the way you set up your classroom, and last but not least, the eye-to-eye contact, just that human part.
Yes.
See me.
Yes.
See me.
Gotta let them know that you see them.
Yes. So thank you so much for that. And we appreciate you joining us on the National New Teacher Support Podcast, brought to you by New Teacher University. Dr. Bobbie Mills, we're so excited to have you with us. We know that this would not be your last time with us. And we're just excited and looking for more. And thank you for supporting our new teachers, because our new teachers, we know that we want them comfortable, we want them confident, and we want them to remain with us, because the average new teacher now has 3 to 5 years experience, and oftentimes they're leaving. They said about 10% leave within their first year. And with the teacher shortages that we're experiencing now, we cannot afford that.
No, we can't. We want to keep them. We want to keep you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us again.
Thank you, Dr. Ross.